Welcome back. In this video, we'll be talking about vetting agencies, from the audits to the calls to some nightmare stories that me and Angus have been across, and we're just talking about. Thanks again, Angus, for joining me. I'll pass to you.
Yeah, I mean, the overall synopsis of this video is going to be, if you wouldn't have a beer with the person who runs your marketing, then you shouldn't hire them. In the long story short, I think that's the ultimate shit test. But nah, I think I'm very keen to talk through this like on a serious level, because it's just like the more that I've grown means the more accounts that I've audited, means the more founders I've spoken to, and just means overall like the more horror stories I've heard. And as we've spoken about, like in a common theme over our last sort of two chats together, is like there's a huge anti-agency narrative out there. And it's like it's tough to hear when we're obviously in a bias spot where we run good agencies, like I like to think, and our clients like us. So when you hear the anti-agency narrative, like, you don't really understand it in a sense, but just when you do hear all the horror stories, it's like, it's tough for the brands. But I think rather than like an anti-agency narrative, we should be focusing on, well, the like good agencies are good, bad agencies are bad. How do you actually just split the difference between the good and the bad agencies, as opposed to just saying like, oh, all agencies are bad and you need to be in-house for everything?
Yeah, right. Um, let's start off with audits. How do you see audits? Like, how do you, as a business owner, actually figure out whether there's value in the audit or whether it's a piece of sales collateral to get you to sign? And the reason why, like, I think this is a good place to begin, is that number one, it's almost everyone's call to action. You get a free audit. And so everyone's offering them. And then number two is that there's obviously a massive incentive structure behind audits, in which they're obviously trying to impress you so that you come on board. And it's essentially free work. It's like, hey, we're going to work for free for 2, 3, 4 hours. And then you get a taste of our ability to execute across this particular service. The issue with audits as well is that you can throw rocks at anyone's house. And so, like, I could open up my own ad account right now and rip it to shreds. And it's like, because there's always 3 ways to do something. So how do you kind of see it, and how does someone know whether they're just throwing rocks at a house that's made of steel, or whether there actually is something wrong with your account?
It's tough because I always just take my audits like so transparently. Like if I open up and people who have got audits from me will know this, but like if I open up a Klaviyo account and it's good, I will tell you that it's good. And it's like, that should be the reality of it. Like I think like a good audit should bake in transparency. And I think the way to know if someone's being transparent is like, as a non-expert, you should be able to listen to an audit and fully understand what they're saying, and there should be data to back it up, but it should also lean into the context of problems that they're facing. Like, I think a good audit should be like a start to finish, I guess. Well, for starters, it should be free. Like, I mean, you said at the start, like brands, every agency call to actions an audit. Well, a lot of like, there's still a lot who don't, and then there's the portion of people who do and they charge for it. So to start with, like your audit should be free from an agency, but it should also be like, to give a counter example of like what a bad audit is, rather, it's like, geez, any agency I see who says like, we have the 3-step pyramid system for like converting e-commerce stores into like 8-figure brands, or like we've cracked like the customer scaling cold system, and like they have all these like crazy ass names for like their scaling systems, like that's always a red flag for me. And it's like, you just want someone who can jump in and like speak English to you and tell you like in clear words, like, this is how I would approach it differently, and this is the proposed upside I think you would get from this. Like, it has to be so clear. Like if someone can't look you in the eye and say like, the way I sort of frame it in a nutshell when I'm talking to someone is like, the point of my audit is to tell you, this is where your account is now. This is the potential in real numbers of where I think it can get to. And this is my exact step-by-step system to get it there. So when someone walks away with a good audit from us, it's like they know exactly what we're going to do. And if they sign with us, we're just then turning that into a roadmap and executing on it. Like there's no clear, like, there's no sort of ambiguity behind like, well, I'm not hopping in and saying like, well, we're going to 10x your account using our secret pyramid scaling system and then like just closing the deal. It's like, I think you can get 20% extra out of this account. And this is steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We need to do this backed up based on this data we've gone and done across other accounts. And it's like very, very black and white.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever we put our audits together, I think we try to ground them in, firstly, like, what are they doing well? You'll hear in a lot of my audits. In fact, I did one the other day where I was just like, hey, you guys are crushing it so much that I'm not even going to really say anything. I'm just going to tell you to probably do some more whitelisting and lean in this direction. I think there's some opportunity there, but that's my 4-minute audit of Meta. And then I spent all the time on Google because Google was actually significantly underperforming and I thought there was some opportunity there. I think if there's no like complementing the current strategy, it either means that you are doing a terrible job. So, okay, fair enough. Or there is a lack of transparency right out of the gates. And then in addition to that, it's any recommendation that we provide, it needs to be, number one, backed in some kind of data set or experience that they can prove. And so if I'm going to come in and say, hey, you shouldn't run Performance Max, it's like I can go into the next account tomorrow and say, hey, you shouldn't run Standard Shopping. And it's like, well, I'm just throwing in anti whatever they're currently doing so that I can make it seem like they're not doing a good job. So if I'm going to make a claim, it needs to be consistent. That's why I think having organic, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but that's why I think having like organic content is really powerful as well, because like my stance on everything is already out there. You just watch through my videos and you'll know, and that will be congruent to my recommendations in audits. And so it's very clear that I am actually being transparent when I'm providing recommendations because I'm not going against what I've said publicly. And then when you make these recommendations, it needs to be substantiated in some kind of material outcome, and also how big that material outcome will be. And I'm not saying like, hey, if you make this change, you'll make $250,000 next month. But what I am saying is how important is this recommendation? Because I can hop into any account and probably make 200 recommendations, but 180 of them don't really matter. They're like, we'll do them if we have your account. They're the 1%ers. They're worth having cleaned up. We want to make sure everything is in place correctly. But really, am I wasting your time telling you that you should flick this setting to something different that's going to make a 1% impact? No. And so we're also very clear about that in our audits, which is that we're only going to focus on the stuff that's going to move the needle. Yes, we could sit here and talk about 1,000 different things, but like other agencies will, and they'll like point a hole in 3 things that don't matter. But I think looking at the audit and really trying to assess, are these things going to move the needle? Are the recommendations that they're making actually substantial and substantiated? And if they're not, you're probably just getting fed a piece of sales collateral, which is completely systematized, which is how most paid media audits run, which is that big agencies have a checklist, 12 things to look at. They pass it to a junior. The junior opens up the ad account. They look for those 12 things. If they identify any of them, goes into a report, and that's the audit. But it's not contextualized to you either. And I think that's probably my last point before I pass back to you, Angus, which is that you need that pre-audit call to have all of the context to be able to actually execute on an audit, or else you're just running completely blind.
Yeah, 100%. Like the pre-order call is like so important because like it also needs to be congruent with their goals. It's like, although I disagree with it, like there's plenty of brands out there who aren't like trying to actively scale ad spend, or who, aren't pumping a bunch of money into ads, or they have no care in the world to grow the business. Maybe they just want to become more profitable or something like that. And it's like, for me doing my audits on the email side, it's like, I could get in and tell them to do a million things, but at the end of the day, like if they're not spending much on ads, or if they're going to drop ad spend, or if they have plans to do XYZ other thing, like none of my email recommendations are going to be a needle mover for them. So it's like, even having the context in that regard is super important. Like I also think there's like a hindsight bias. It's like, it's very easy for me to say, look at a marketing campaign and be like, oh, I would have done that differently. And it's like, well, yeah, everyone in the world potentially would have done it differently. Like you never know until you do something. And like we've done campaigns which flop or they don't go to plan, or like, maybe you would have always like, there's plenty of things I've done for clients where in hindsight I would have tackled it a bit differently. Like that's life. That's part of being a good marketer, is like trial and error and testing. So one thing that like I look for in accounts is like, maybe look at a flow structure, or I'll look at a sign up form and I'll be like, this is performing how it's performing. Could we do better? Yes, maybe. But one thing that I'm seeing here is that you're not testing things whatsoever. And it's like one of my main points in all my audits is just like testing volume. And it's like any marketer in the world can hop into an account and say they would do things differently or they would change things. But it's like realistically, like any good marketer should just be alluding to like, testing volume and stuff, which I'm sure is apparent on ads. So I guess my point there is like, also look out for hindsight bias. Like if someone hops on an audit or a marketing agency tells you that they would be doing everything differently, it's like, well, A, based on what? And B, like, what's their sort of philosophy and structures behind testing? Like how are they going to attack that? Because there's a good chance that what they're telling you is also going to be wrong or not pan out well. It's really about like agility and like how quick people can adapt.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point in sales calls, audits, any interaction with an agency is you kind of want to find what their underlying philosophy or framework is towards whatever they do. And so like we have a very clear, well articulated approach to Meta and Google and then e-commerce as a whole. And that becomes very evident if you have interactions with us, what those pillars are and then why we work around them and then what our ultimate belief system is behind the platforms. And so you kind of buy into our belief system if you work with us because that's the way that we operate. You'll probably go to some agencies and it won't even be clear if they even have kind of like this operating system of the way that they think. It's just, we had SOPs that were built 6 years ago and we're just running them. And there's not like thoughtful innovation around anything. And that's kind of a red flag that I look out for as well.
Yeah, I think like it'd be almost good if there was like it's almost like a job interview in a sense. And I think ecom brands need to know like questions to like the right questions to ask. Cause like like anyone can put together like a good audit, but it's it's about challenging the brand on that audit as well. Like I actually had a really good call the other day where I did an audit and I just told someone like, look, I would do these flow structures differently. And he turned around and just said like, based on what? And I was like, it was like the first brand to like ask me that probably. And I was like, wow, that's actually a great question. Well, like, here's why I do X, Y, Z. Like, here's some data from other accounts. Like, here's how it compares to yours and like similar niches. And like, you're sort of forced to prove your own philosophy a bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think like you need to be able to ask the agency, like, how would you do this and why? It's like, for us, how would you set out our content calendar and why? Like, why do you design emails that way? Like, why do you do your flow structures this way? And it's not just like a matter of the founders sitting there yapping, going like, oh, we do this because it's part of our XYZ pyramid system, like, which is, we roll out across the team. It's like, no, like, this is based on data. Like we've worked across, and in other calls me and you have spoken about, like, exposure to accounts. It's like, they need to be able to show you, I guess, like, it sort of ties me into my next point of just like case studies in general. Like, I think you should be able to combine like an audit with a case study with theories on organic content. And it's kind of funny because it's like, it's almost like a double-edged sword. It's like the best way to get clients as an agency now is being available on every different channel and putting yourself out there, putting your philosophies out there and putting free resources out there. So it's like organic content, YouTube content, running ads, like giving out free resources, like, calendars, calculators, whatever it may be, doing free audits. And then it's like the best way to shit test an agency as a brand is to consume all this content. And the more you consume, the more you're going to really find out what the truth is about someone. Like, you can't watch 4 hours of an agency's YouTube content and not understand their philosophy. Like, you're going to know if they're a grifter, you're going to know if they're shit. If an agency doesn't have 4 hours of YouTube content, they don't have a single short form reel on Instagram, they don't have a single free resource where you can sort of go through and unpack like all of their, their structures and the way they attack certain things. It's like, there's probably holes in their philosophy. So I think it's like, an agency should be able to tell you why. And a big way they can tell you why indirectly is just by like posting content themselves and like, actually walking the walk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds super biased because you and me put content out, but I do think that if an agency doesn't like, just watch an agency's content. Like, I think that's pretty much a good barometer for their competence. And first off, there aren't many agencies in Australia that put out much content, but then the ones that do, watch their content. It's look for fluff versus quality and like actionables off the mark. Are we talking about, hey, you should run an end of financial year sale? Or are we talking about, here's how you should specifically approach it within a marketing calendar, and here's how you consider unit economics when you're discounting? Like, what kind of depth is there? Because the depth in the content that they put out is a direct representation of the depth that they have internally.
Yeah.
Unless they have some kind of marketing plan where they're just pushing out generic content.
Yeah, but I think it's also about like authenticity. It's like, obviously, like when you're dealing with an agency who's good enough to have a lot of clients, like with that, you're not going to be dealing directly with the founder on a day-to-day basis. Like otherwise you're probably not in a good agency, or they would have more clients. And it's like, that's the reality of it. So you still need to know though where the founder sits with their philosophies, because a good agency will also have a top-down approach, like they're sort of extensions of the founder's mindset, the founder's beliefs, the founder's training. So like, I think authenticity in the content from the founder is important. Like I could go on Instagram right now and pull up like 100 agency brand pages, which are just filled with like, and when we're talking about building content, we mean like you said, in-depth content. Like I could pull up any agency brand page now in Australia, and there's so many that just post like absolute crap, like infographics on there and social media, or like, here's what the team wore to the office today, and like all that like crap, like shit like that. And it's like, as an ecom brand, like you're not buying into an agency because of their ability to post cool infographics that just regurgitates like AI information, or like, to find out what everyone in their office ate for lunch today. It's like, you want to know like what the founder is like thinking on their own like personal pages. And it's a big reason why I just get on my page and I just make reels about what's happening, whether it's like storytelling about a client, or talking about like an actual in-depth process or system, or the reason we do things. And it's like, I think if I was an ecom brand, before I ever booked a call with an agency or applied for a free audit, I would probably watch a lot of their content. And some of the most successful partnerships I've had, like if you track the sort of client journey, it's like they follow me on Instagram, or they subscribe to me on YouTube, they watch XYZ hours of content, they decide for themselves whether or not they like me. Like there's plenty of people who watch my content and go, oh, I don't really like this guy, it seems annoying or whatever, and they will never reach out, and that's fine. It saves us both the trouble. But there's people who will watch my content and be like, oh, I really agree with what this person has to say. Let's then see how they would apply these philosophies to my own account. Then they reach out and book a call. Like it's not emotional decisions. It's like decisions that are based on actually information that is out there, publicly available.
Yeah. Sometimes I do wonder how much of a filter there is just having my head on stuff, whether that's filtering out like 50% of my target demographic.
Yeah. I mean, it could be.
Yeah, no.
Don't sell yourself short.
What about like there's also so many horror stories. We could sit here for 2 hours and talk about them, but I want to throw a couple out just so people have context on some agency red flags. So you might be with an agency at the moment, you might not know that this is a red flag, or you're out there, you're looking for agencies. One big one in the paid media space is not owning your own ad account. We've recently onboarded 8-figure brands, multiple of them, who don't own their own ad account, which is crazy. And they're with some of the biggest agencies in Australia. And so we've had to go through this process of creating a new ad account that they now own, and slowly transition campaigns over, moving pixels over. Sometimes they don't even let you have the pixels, so you got to start fresh with a new pixel. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars lost in terms of just learning data based on a simple mistake, which is that you trust an agency that doesn't even give you access to your own account.
Yeah. I had the same thing. Literally, I was just telling you about this yesterday. Is like, there's one agency who runs one of my clients' performance channels, and they own the ad accounts and their own business manager. And so it's like the client is then put in a really awkward spot where if they want to leave that agency, they need to tread extremely lightly or find a way to like get their ad account before even considering that, which is nightmare fuel because I don't think it can be done. And what is interesting though is people like say who run ecom groups like your Davey Fogarty's in the world, they love to tell the one horror story or the handful of horror stories of like agencies are here to steal your ad account and own it. And it's like, bro, that's a red flag for anyone. That's not like a representation of agencies. So I think it's obvious like when you are working with agencies, like you obviously need to look out for red flags like that. But yeah, like I also don't think stuff like that should be like the cause of like the whole anti-agency narrative because there's bad apples like everywhere you go. But yeah, I mean, there's so many horror stories. Like even like one of the most difficult concepts to talk about is like agency pricing models. And it's like, I've had clients, like we have a mutual client who has spent like, the way we met them is like they'd spent like 25 grand on like the most rubbish agency service in history. And like it, you know, did a lot of bad things for their business. And it's like, how as an ecom brand are you meant to navigate not only like A, finding someone you trust, B, validating that like they know what they're talking about, and then C, making sure you're paying a fair price, I guess. And it's like, there is so much to it. It's almost like hard to, it would be hard. Like I understand how it would be hard to be an ecom brand and like navigate through all of this, even though it sort of seems easy from where we sit to like differentiate the good and the bad.
Yeah. Like I think it seems obvious when you're on the agency side, and your job is to audit other agencies, right? But when you're on the ecom side, like I totally see how it would be really difficult to see through a lot of this stuff, particularly when like dreams are being spun up left, right, and center. It's just you're constantly being sold on a narrative of how to fix your business. I think the people that get hit the worst are like anyone in the 1 to 10 mil range because it is easier for those kind of operators to fall down the path of, oh, you're going to turn me into profitability. There's a nice audit in place. Let's jump the gun and run it. And then they get tied into like a 12-month contract or something.
Well, I think there's also the same thing for zero to like if say let's say we're talking in bands here. Like if you're talking 0 to 1 mil, like before 1 mil a year, like you probably haven't proved like tons of product market fit to like cold traffic. And there's no agency, and I could be wrong, but there'd be nearly no agency out there who could sit down with that business and tell them we're going to be the agency to get you to 100 mil because of our proven system that works for all stores. It's like, no, there's so many more factors at play there. Like if you're below 1 mil a year and you're partnering with an agency, like you need to understand that the most important thing here is probably like finding product market fit in the market, and no agency can change what your product is. So if you're going into a relationship with the agency, you need to manage the expectations of like, don't listen to an agency who sits there and tells you like we're definitely going to be able to scale you to millions, because it's like they don't know at that stage because you haven't even validated it yourself. So I think at that level, like you need to have your expectations with the agency very clear of what we're trying to do here. And an agency at that level is more so trying to help you validate product market fit. And if you can do so, then scale. If you're at 1 to 10 million a year and you're actively scaling, an issue that they'll fall into is any agency can probably look good at that scenario. Like you don't need to be I've had 8, 9 figure brands who are scaling well because they have a sick product in a sick market working with mid agencies. And when you ask them like, well, what's the agency done for the last year? Like, where's the scale coming from? Like they have no idea. And it also then comes down to the transparency. So I think like to try break it into two rules, it's like if you're a business who maybe hasn't validated your products, is really struggling to scale, you've been trying to do it on your own and you haven't really been able to scale like too far, like don't dive in thinking an agency is going to solve all your problems, because a lot of it starts with just like the demand for your product. Alternatively, if you're a business who has not had any problem scaling, you have really good product market fit, you're sort of flying, it's kind of like anyone can jump on the coattails of that and do like a decent job on paper. So then it becomes like a game about transparency, long-term vision, roadmaps, like executing on what they say, testing cadence. So I think all those things are like really important to consider once you've sort of passed that 1 to 10 mil mark and you are actively scaling at like a decent rate.
Yeah. I had a new performance marketer in the team the other day ask me this question, which is he asked me in a one-on-one, have we ever managed to help a sub $1 million brand find a product market fit? And I said, no, we've never been successful. Because at the end of the day, like repositioning a product or a brand aggressively through paid media is, number one, so abrasive to even go after that with a early stage founder, like try to reposition their whole business because they want to test the business that they've built. And then number two, you ultimately like can't change the product to a degree. And so that's why we don't work with anyone sub 1 million, because you don't have product market fit. And it's one of like the top performing videos on our YouTube channel about like sub $1 million brands don't have product market fit. Here's why. Um, and so, yeah, I also stress like heavily to anyone sub 1 mil. It's like your focus should not be on trying to vet the best paid media agency in Australia, because I'll tell you what, if you find the best paid media agency in Australia, um, they're going to charge you as much as your entire business is doing in revenue right now. Like it's not a good exercise. The exercise should be find product market fit and get yourself to 2 mil as soon as possible, and then start to look at bringing on talent. But don't go out there trying to vet agencies.
Yeah, and I don't want to deter any brand sub 1 mil from like potentially not getting with a right agency. Like I literally just onboarded a client who was stuck at like 60 to 70K a month for ages, who just hadn't cracked like ads, but purely because they had no idea what they were doing. And they hired like a good performance marketer, like just one like freelance media buyer who scaled them to like 120K within like a month. And it's like, that's a scenario of like someone who just wasn't really doing ads properly, who just started probably setting up some like good structures in the ad account and some good creative and scaled. So like it certainly can be done, but that'll like you can get product market fit from other people's products too. Like if you're selling in a competitive niche, it's like obviously like you've got product market fit. It's then becomes down to like the positioning and like the competence of the person running the ad account. But like yeah, I think generally speaking, like don't trust any, like if you haven't managed to like even like get traction, like don't trust any agency who tells you that they can. But yeah, I think like if we're talking then beyond that, like the 1 to 10 or the 10 to 100 mil, it's like like if you are a good business, because I think we could sit here and talk about like bad e-com businesses who get burnt by agencies all year round, and the reality is it's just like no matter how good an agency is, a lot of the time they can't, like, as bad as it sounds, like you can't polish a turd. Like if you've got a bad business with no product market fit and you're already unprofitable and you can't scale and your market's small, like there's going to be a million reasons you're not scaling, and maybe one of them is you have a bad agency and then you have 99 other problems anyway. But if you're a business who's healthy, profitable, like scaling decently, growing, trying to work out how to get the most out of your channels, like the things you should be looking at is like, yeah, get audits. Does this make sense? Is this agency owner transparent? Like, are their philosophies and their structures out there publicly available? Can I consume their content? Can I sit down, have a conversation with this founder, press him on the way that his agency works, or press her on the way that her agency works? And can they explain it like cohesively and simply? And does it make sense? Like, I think all those things are like very important for businesses. Cause like, I think one thing that you said to me the other day, which was super interesting, like just about hiring when we were having dinner the other night, was like the good versus great thing that you learned about. And I think one of the real issue here is not bad businesses who are struggling dealing with bad agencies. Like, yes, I feel sorry for those businesses. Like it would suck to get burnt. But the real issue that I think is like when you have a good or a great business who is stuck with a mediocre agency. Like the mediocre agency might be doing a good job, a good enough job to get by. Like, they're hitting ROAS targets and they're sort of like, the business is profitable and doing well, but they're not a great agency who's actively like helping you scale and like hit your targets. Like, I think that's like the real sort of disservice that happens in the agency world.
Yeah, and I'll give that bit of context as well, because I think that's actually really good, which is that someone told me a while ago, they said that what will keep your company good is good people, because good people aren't great and it's really hard to get rid of a good person. But bad people are fantastic because everyone in the entire organization identifies when someone is bad, and no one cares when they're gone, and it's easy to get rid of them, etc. But someone good, they're good. Like may as well keep them there. Like we're not going to get rid of them. And it's the exact same thing with agencies, right? Which is like you have a good agency, it's like, they're good. It'd be annoying to move to another. And also there's so much salesy pitches out there. Like, can I trust that this will be a good jump to a great agency? I don't know. But it is so true. Like we onboarded a brand yesterday. They do about 8-9 mil a year. They've been with a okay, good agency. Like they're doing an okay job. But they've been doing an okay job for 6 years, and the business has grown 5% in 6 years. So, like, yeah, I don't know. Arguably, they haven't been doing a good job. And what it really takes is like they haven't been able to identify in 6 years how to grow, which in my opinion would be a red flag. But what it then takes is like a great agency to be able to come in and really identify, okay, they're doing most of the basics here well, but where's like the opportunity to take this thing where they can now spend $100,000-$200,000 a month, where they're currently stuck at this plateau. I couldn't agree more.
I think to try and actually give like a cohesive answer to like how do you vet an agency, which I think is like a hard thing to answer in a distinct like sentence. But if I was a brand and I was looking for agencies based on what I've seen and what I do and other agencies I've seen, I would be looking for not just like logos on a website and pretty numbers. I would be looking for like content, like organic, authentic, real content that explains real philosophies, real scenarios, real problems that you're struggling. I'd be looking for video testimonials or like, collaborative case studies with brands. Like the video testimonial is, as much as it can seem cheesy, is the one thing you can't fake. It's like the one thing that an agency cannot fake. They cannot fake a public facing founder who gets on camera and speaks highly of an agency. So we're looking for video testimonials, and I'd be looking for proof or data or written case studies that they've done it with similar brands facing similar problems to you. Like if you're a 7-figure brand in supplements and this agency has a bunch of logos in the fashion space and goes like, no video testimonials, no case studies, no nothing, and they sort of just hop on an audit and say, oh, like, man, I've got the pyramid scaling system to blow up this account. And you go on their Instagram and it's all just like cheesy, bloody, like agency, like culture building content. It's like, they're not going to be a good fit. But if you can go on a website, speak to an operator who's worked with supplement brands facing similar problems to you at similar sizes, maybe they have some video testimonials or video collaborative case studies. You can go on their Instagram, see content they've made about scaling brands in the consumable space. It's like, well, then the next step after that is to get the audit done and make sure that the audit is transparent and solves the problems, or at least speaks to the problems that you're trying to solve.
Clip that. That's a good summary.
Yeah, I think so. It's taken me a while to like get that out on this video, just because like it's genuinely like a hard question to like muster in your head.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a good summary. I think we wrapped the video there, unless you got anything else to add.
Nah, I don't think so. I think that's, and then back to my very first statement of the call, which is like, if you wouldn't have a beer with the person running your, and a metaphor, which is like, realistically, like if you can't stand the person running your thing, or you think they're like an absolute cheese ball, or like, just a bad person, like don't let them anywhere near your bloody business.
I agree. All right. Thanks, Angus. This was a good one.
Easy. Chat soon.